Hello and welcome back to the first real life integration scenario on this course. So, as we've discussed previously, now going forward, we are going to build upon various real life integration scenarios. We are going to take an example from an actual business case, right? So, and we'll build upon that. We'll use the knowledge that we have acquired so far using all of the different artifacts, and we'll start building the actual interfaces as if you're already working for an organization and you are working as an integration developer and you're being given this assignment, and we'll do this hands-on at the same time, right? So make sure you're following and you're doing this hands-on with me. Pause this video as many times as you want, re-watch this as many times as you want. And if you don't understand anything, if you have any questions, if there is any gaps, make sure to use the Slack channel and ask there. Remember, I'm always there responding in the Slack channel, but at the same time, there are few other students who have already been through this, right? And who are already working in the industry as an integration developers or integration architect are there part of that group. So it's a very useful group. Make sure you use that for your help, right? All right, so let's go ahead and start with our first business case scenario, our first integration scenario that we'll build using the Azure integration technologies, right? So let's understand what is the requirement first of all, right? So let's understand what is the requirement, right? So let's assume you're working for a retail client, right? Your client is a retail company. They have their business as selling something via their store or via their online portal. It's a retail company that you're working for, and they have their own e-commerce platform where users go on their website and order stuff all the time, right? So this is very classic scenario, and it applies to almost any industry regardless retail or not, right? So we're starting with the smaller scenario, but we are going to build on top of this, right? So make sure you're understanding the business requirement correctly, because this is going to be enhanced in the next section and in the following videos and so on, right? So the initial requirement is that whenever somebody places an order on the website, right, that's your e-commerce website that's built upon a different technology, right? And the requirement is that whatever has been ordered, that needs to be updated in your ERP system. So let's assume your ERP is SAP or JD Edwards or Dynamics 365 or any other ERP system, right? Or a custom built ERP system. So your ERP system has an inventory module, which has the inventory information very much up to date to the minute, right? So whenever somebody orders something on your e-commerce platform, you need to make sure that that number of items have been reduced from the inventory system in your ERP, right? So that whoever needs to do the manufacturing, eventually they know that, okay, this is the quantity we have left with right now, right? This is very basic scenario and it happens all the time, right? So this is not the only action. Usually when you order online, it triggers multiple flows, right? It would trigger a flow to the warehouse system to start shipping that item. It would trigger a flow to the financing system to charge that credit card. It would, trigger multiple flows like this. One of those flows would be to update the inventory system, right? So let's go ahead and see how we want to achieve this, right? So here is our customer, and customer is using the e-commerce portal right now, and he's ordering something, and whatever has been ordered, that item and the quantity needs to be sent to the ERP system, which ERP system has an API for that. So you need to connect your e-commerce portal to this ERP API and enable this data exchange, right? But here is a challenge. Your ERP API needs only 4 fields. It needs the item number, it needs the quantity, and at what price it has been sold, right? And the order number. So it doesn't need a lot of details. It just needs these four fields, and it needs in a particular JSON format. Whereas your e-commerce portal, it deals with XML. So whatever is ordered, it is going to generate a series of XML files, and it is going to send it to various systems, right? So now you have a challenge. Your ERP needs JSON in a particular format with limited data. All it cares is that what was the order number, which item number, how much was the quantity, and at what price, right? And you need to build an interface that would do this change, that would do this transformation on the fly, and connect these two systems so that the data can flow from e-commerce platform to your ERP system, right? So how do we plan to do this, right? So whenever you have a requirement, before you start on to coding, right, or working on the actual code set, you should first think through the design, right? So this is the flow. How do we want to design this? So in the current integration stack that we have, we are going to build a logic app, right? And we are going to build a logic app as an API. So when we say logic app as an API, that means the trigger of that logic app is going to be an HTTP trigger, right? That would make that logic app as an API. And then inside that logic app, we are going to do this transformation. We're going to receive the XML that would have a series of fields, and we would map them to the smaller JSON file. So we'll do this transformation, and then we will call the actual ERP API, right? Let's see how the data is going to look like. So here is your requirement. So whenever you receive your requirement, it's very important that you get the actual data set, right? Because this is what you're going to deal with, right? So you need a sample data. Whenever you're working on any integration project, always ask for a sample file, a sample data that you can use to develop your integrations, right? So the one on the left is the XML that's generated by the e-commerce portal. So this is the XML that the logic app will receive, okay? But the ERP needs the JSON, which is on the right side of the screen. As you can see, this is the JSON that the ERP needs. It only needs these four fields, right? And in the XML, we are receiving maybe 20 different fields, right? Let's see how the mapping is going to work, right? So the second most important part of any integration project is the mapping, right? You have a source system or a source message, and then you have a destination system or a destination message, right? And this is most of the time is not the same. So there has to be some kind of transformation in your integration. And that's usually called as mapping, right? So you need to have the mapping specifications as well. So to keep this starting project a simple one, we've used a smaller message which is only four fields. Let's see how the mapping is going to look like. So the first field, which is the order number, it will get its data from this top parameter. That's the attribute called order number, and the value is 99503. Okay, so whatever value we receive as part of this order number attribute, right, that would be automatically mapped to this order number in the JSON. And then the second field we need is a part number. Now the part number is part of this item section in the bottom of this XML, right? So here is the part number. The third one is the quantity, which is right after the product name. So the quantity would be mapped to this quantity. And the fourth field is US price. So whatever is the price in a US dollar for this item, right, that would be mapped to this fourth field. So this is how the mapping is going to look like. Let's go ahead and hop onto the Azure portal, and let's start building the logic app that would accept the HTTP request. This XML would be the request XML, and we'll see how we want to carry this forward, right? So let's go to the Azure portal and let's start by creating our Logic app. Okay, so we are on the Azure portal, and be a little bit patient in these exercises, right? Because I don't want to break these videos into multiple videos. I would like you to do this exercise from the beginning to the end with me in one go, right? So you can pause this video or watch this again and again if you need to, but I'm keeping these videos intact for the entire exercise so that you can follow through the entire video in one go, right? So even though the video is going to be a little bit longer, have a little bit of patience and start doing it with me. Okay, so we are on the Azure portal. Let's go ahead and click on new resource, and we want to create a new Logic app, right? Let's go ahead and search for Logic app. So that's our new Logic app. Let's click on create. Let's select the resource group CI 101. Let's give it a name. This is going to, so whenever you're naming any artifact, right, try to give it a descriptive name. So whoever comes and reads or works with the Logic app after you go, right, after you're done development, if somebody else uses this, they should also be able to easily understand what this Logic app does, right? So give it a friendly name, give it a name that's more descriptive. So I'm going to name this Logic app eCom portal to ERP, and then the actual data that we are transmitting is items data, right? So I'm going to name it items. So this would tell me that eCom portal to ERP items. So items are being transmitted from eCom portal to the ERP. Okay, let's go. You can come up with your own names. There is no rule of thumb as such, right? But make sure it's more descriptive and user friendly. Let's go ahead and create this. And as soon as it's ready for us, we would click on the go to resource. There we go to resource. So it would take us to the template where we would start building this Logic app. Okay, and this should be familiar by now because we've already built few Logic apps in the past so far, right? And you also know that if we want to build the Logic app as an API, we should start with the HTTP request. So here is the HTTP request as a trigger. So let's start with this trigger. Okay, so, and as soon as we save this, it would generate the endpoint, right? That we would eventually give it to the e-commerce platform. So they would use this endpoint and they will send the XML input to this endpoint API, right? So let's go ahead and save this. And as soon as we save, the endpoint has been created, right? So let's copy this endpoint and let's have the postman ready to call this Logic app because we don't have the e-commerce platform with us. So what we are going to do is we will use the postman as an e-commerce platform. So we will trigger this Logic app from the postman, right? Let's go to the postman, and in the new request, this is going to be a post, and let's copy. In the body, let's go ahead and copy the XML, right? So the raw body, and this is going to be XML, and we also have this sample request XML. Let's copy this in the postman, right? Okay, let's go back to the Logic app. Okay, so we will receive the XML as an input here, okay? And then we have to call another API, the ERP API, right? Now we don't have the ERP system right now. So let's go ahead and create another Logic app as an API that we will use as if it was an ERP API, right? So let's open the Azure homepage. Let's go to the Azure portal and let's create another API using LogicApps. So let's go to LogicApps. Let's create new, and I'm going to name this ERP API temp, because this is a temporary API we are creating so that it works as if it was an ERP API, right? And this is also going to be an HTTP request because it's supposed to be an API, right? So again, let's click on this HTTP request and let's save this. So the ERP API is ready, and this is the endpoint for the ERP API. Let's go ahead and save this somewhere. So ERP endpoint is this. Okay. Okay, let's go back to our first logic app. This is the integration logic app, right? This is where we would receive the XML request from the e-commerce platform. Now, let's assume we have received the request. What's the next step, right? We want to call the ERP API, right? So how do we call the ERP API? Let's add the next step. In the next step, we are going to select HTTP. Okay, you can simply select it here if it's recommended. If not, you can just go ahead and type HTTP, because the ERP has an API. API means HTTP, right? So okay, let's go ahead and select this HTTP, and let's select the first HTTP. Okay, the method is going to be a post method. The URI is going to be, this is the URI. Let's go ahead and copy this, right? So this is the temporary API that we've created that is going to behave as if it's an ERP API. Let's paste this here, and then in the body, this is the sample body. This is what we have to pass. Let's copy this in the body. Okay, and usually whenever we have the API, we also want to send the response back to the caller, right? So here we have sent this request to this ERP API. Let's go ahead and add the HTTP request, and this time let's select the response. Okay, and in the response, we just want to return 200 as a status code. So this is a successful status code, right? So this would complete the end-to-end API of this interface. But here we yet to add the actual values of these JSON parameters, right? So how do you extract the values from an XML, right? So I'm assuming you are some sort of developer. You have done some sort of development, right, in your career while you're taking this course. So I'm assuming you are familiar with the XML and JSON, right? But just for the sake of, someone who has not worked with XMLs before, if you look into the same chapter, I've also attached something called XML viewer. It's an old XML viewer. I still use it. It's called Dan Sharp XML viewer. You can use that XML viewer to extract the XPath of each of the fields in XML. Okay, so if you don't know XPath or XML, I strongly suggest you go back to Google and understand what these terms are. But now, assuming that you know XML, and we need to find the value of this specific field in the XML, right? Let's go ahead and open that Dan Sharp tool, Dan Sharp XML viewer tool, and let's see how we can do that, right? So I'm going to go to this Dan Sharp XML viewer folder, right? You can download this from this chapter, and I'm going to open this application. And in this application, I'm going to open this XML, the one that I have, a sample order XML. I have saved this on the desktop. Let's go ahead and open this simple XML, order XML, right? So what this tool does is it allows you to select any parameter in this XML that you are interested in, and it would give you the XPath value. XPath is the exact path to that particular field that would give you the value of that field, right? So here in the order number, what we are interested in is the value of this order number attribute, which would be this in this case, right? So let's go ahead and select order number here, right? This is the order number. So this is the XPath. Let's copy this XPath and let's check if this returns the right value or not. So let's go to the XPath query and let's paste this and execute. There we go. If you see, it returned the value of the order number attribute, right? Now this is a long XPath. You can shorten this XPath, right? So what we can do is we can remove this additional data of the namespace and everything. We don't need to have that, right? So all we need is this order here. So let's remove everything else before and after order. And from here to here. And then after order, we need the order number attribute, right? So whenever there is an attribute, the @ symbol is needed for that. So we'll leave the @ and we'll remove the rest of the details to shorten this XPath, right? So this is the short XPath. Let's execute. It returns the exact same value, right? But this returns the value along with this field. If you just want this value itself, right, you can use the XPath functions, and there is a function called string, and put the XPath in the parentheses, and this would return the string value of this, right? Let's go ahead and see what it returns. There we go. So this is the value that we are interested in, right? So because we are receiving XML as an input, we can use the XPath to extract the specific values out of the XML, right? Let's copy this XPath, okay? And let's go back to the original Logic app now. In this order number here, this is where I want the value of the actual order number from the XML. What I'm going to do is here I'm going to click on the expression. Okay, so this is where we will use various expressions. So in the expression, there is a function called XPath. So if you start typing by XPath, right, it would give you the function. And let's see what this function does. So this function needs two inputs. The first one is the actual XML itself, and the second input is the XPath, right? So in order to give the XML input, the first input that we received at the request, right, that was the entire XML body, right? The body is the XML. So let's give it the body. Let's go to the dynamic content and let's select the body. Okay, and there is one more thing. Before we directly assign the body as an XML, let's also make sure that it is actually an XML. So I'm going to also use another function called XML, and I'll put the trigger body inside that XML function. So this would ensure that the input body is in XML format. And the second input is going to be the XPath that we just retrieved from the XML viewer tool. So let's go ahead and put that in the inverted. Let's paste this here. Okay, so this is the XPath. Okay, let's go ahead and click on OK. All right, so as you can see, whatever is the value of that XPath output would be assigned here, right? Let's do the exact same thing for the rest of the 4 items, right? So the second is the part number. So let's go ahead and find the XPath of the part number, which is going to be this one. Let's copy this. Let's paste inside the string, and let's remove the additional strings to shorten the XPath. So first one is going to be the order, second one is the item, and third one is the attribute called part number. There we go, right? So string, order, item, and attribute part number. Let's execute and see if it returns the result. There we go. So it returned this result, right? So let's go ahead and copy this XPath. In the logic app, for the part number, we will do the exact same thing that we did in the order number, right? Let's go to the, let's save this once. And make sure your cursor is between these two inverted values, right? And then go to expression, and XPath is the first function. The first value is going to be the body, but we want that body inside the XML body, and then we need the XPath. Okay. Third one is the quantity. Let's get the quantity XPath. Quantity is here. So as you can see, the only thing that changed is that instead of this attribute, now we are getting this element called quantity. So I'm simply going to copy this quantity and let's replace this attribute, and it should return the quantity to us. So there you go, quantity 1, right? Let's copy this again. We can just use the earlier version, right? Let's copy this for the quantity as well. And let's just update the last field to be quantity. Update. And for the US price as well, let's copy the existing XPath. Let's paste the existing XPath here. But instead of the quantity, we want the US price, right? So let's copy this and update the XPath at the end to make it US price. Update. So this request would be sent to the ERP API, right? Let's go ahead and save this. So we've just built an entire interface. Even though this is very raw, we need to do a lot of things. We need to do the exception handling and a lot of testing. But we've just built an entire interface that would accept the XML order and then extract the values of the 4 fields that the ERP needs, and we'll call the ERP API via this HTTP action, right? All right, let's go ahead and call this API as if we are calling it from the e-commerce platform, right? Let's go to the postman, and this is the XML that we are going to pass, right? And if everything is fine, we would go ahead and open the ERP API and we'll see what was received there. So first of all, let's go ahead and send this request. And we received 200. Okay, that means the logic app was executed successfully. If this was executed successfully, let's go ahead and open the ERP API and let's see the run history of the ERP API. That would give us the exact input that was received here. All right, so it was received, and let's see what was received exactly. There we go. This was the exact input that was received by this ERP API, right? So we've just built an interface that would receive this huge XML, right? And it would transform that XML into this smaller JSON file, and we'll send this JSON to the API exposed by the ERP system, right? So I understand this has been a very long video, long session, right? Make sure to, follow this from the very beginning. There are so many things we've touched upon, but this is a very basic scenario. In the upcoming scenarios, we're going to enhance the same scenario. We are going to take this further, right? We're going to advance this. So I hope this is all making sense to you, and I hope you're following this through, right? Do the hands-on. Go ahead and use the Slack channel if you have any questions. In the next video, we'll enhance this and we'll add another system as a recipient system in the same interface, right? Stick around. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video.